Okay, now we're going. Okay, we all set? So we'll just do a couple examples here. We're solving by factoring. These are all quadratic equations. Quadratic equations are something that have a square in them someplace. Could you guys pause the side conversation for just a couple minutes, please? Thank you. And the best, most straightforward way to solve these things is by factoring. So when you do this, you have to have a 0 on one side. So our first example already has that, but that 0 has to be there or you cannot do this. So if you look at number 2, we're going to have to do a little bit of work to get that 0 on the other side, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. Once you have a 0 on one side, you're just going to factor it. So I'm going to look at this thing and say, okay, this got 3 terms, so we're going to have to do that whole x in box thing. So I know it's going to factor. I'm going to go ahead and set up my next step here right underneath it. And I'll do my work off to the side. So I'm setting up my X or diamond, and then I'll set up my box because we're going to have to do both for this one. You guys practiced a whole bunch last week, so hopefully we're getting really quick with this. What goes on the top of the diamond? A times C, in this case, A times C, that's 5 times 4. So we would have a 20 in the top. A times C is 20. What goes in the bottom? In this case, it's 21. Whatever B is goes in the bottom. And then we have to come up with 2 numbers for the side that are going to multiply to give us 20 and add up to 21. So always multiplying to give you the top number, adding up to the bottom number. 1 and 20 would work, wouldn't it? 1 and 20? Cool. That worked out well. 1 and 20. All right. Make sure everybody's with us. Anybody have any questions up to this point? This is the hardest part for me, or at least it was when I was learning it, just remembering where everything went. So this spot here, we're going to fill in the inside of the box here. This comes from the first term, which is 5n squared. And then the other corner diagonal from it comes from the last term, which is 4. The other 2 pieces inside come from the x, right? The sides of the x that we got. We're going to put a variable after them. So our variable is n in this problem, so it's going to be 1n and 20n. So fill in 1n and 20n in there. Oh, you want to write just n here instead of 1n? That's fine. Same thing. All right, so what can we put off to the side here? What's something that could multiply to give you both 5n squared and 20n? What goes into both 5 and 5 goes into both of those, doesn't it? Let's get a 5 out there. Does n go into both of those? Let's put an n out there too, because n goes into both of those also. And then we just need to kind of work backwards to fill out the top and the rest of the side here. So I'm thinking to myself, what multiplies times 5n to give me 5n squared? It would have to be 1. 5 times 1 is 5. N times n gives me n squared. So that would be a 1n. 5n to get 20n, we would need to multiply by 4, I believe, right? 5 times 4 is 20. We've already got the n. And then I'm thinking this is just going to end up being 1, right? Because it's 1 times 1n is 1n, 1 times 4 is 4. Yeah, totally. All right, so let's write our factors down here. So we've got 5n plus 1 and 1n plus 4. And I'm going to leave the 1 out that time. Cool, we did our first step. It was a long first step. That was just the first step. Now we just have to solve it. So we're solving. Our ultimate goal is to get something that says n equals some number. Anybody remember what to do next? Yeah, good for you. Yeah, we're going to split this up and make two equations. They're each going to be equal to 0. So one of them is going to be 5n plus 1 equals 0, and the other one's going to be n plus 4 equals 0. And then we just have to solve those two equations. So we've got a couple more steps, but they're just simple algebra steps. Like for this one, I'm going to go minus 1 on both sides to get 5n equals -1. And then divide by 5. And I'm sorry I didn't leave you guys a lot of room here. So if you write kind of big, you might need to be doing your work on a scratch paper. Just staple it to your handout when you turn it in, if you do use scratch paper. So I got -1/5 for one of my answers. Can anybody tell me what I'm going to get over here without actually writing out all the steps? -4. So do you think would any of you feel comfortable going from 5n minus 1 straight to -1/5? I'm okay with you skipping these steps here to go straight from here to here. If you get to the point where you're confident doing that, I don't need to see your algebra steps here for this. All right, that's one problem. It's a lot of steps, isn't it? That's a good math problem. Good math problems have lots of steps. All right, let's do number 2. This one I can't start solving yet because we don't have a 0 on one side. So you always have to get a 0 on one side. And it looks to me like the easiest place to get a 0 would be here. There's less stuff going on over here. So I'm going to get rid of everything on this side and then we will have a 0. All right, so let's do plus x squared on both sides, plus 1x squared. And let's do minus 1x to get rid of that x. And that should cancel everything over here and get us the 0 that we want. So what do we got? 3x squared plus 19x minus 40. And we know that's going to factor. Well, we're hoping it factors. All of these will, by the way. But we're going to have to do the work to do it. So go ahead and get your diamond, your X, and your box set up. I showed some of you a shortcut without doing the diamond in the box last Thursday. Has anybody been using any shortcuts for factoring these? I had a couple people in my other class get pretty good at one of those shortcuts. All right, well, we'll do it the long way. That's fine. We got a pretty big number in the top of our X this time, don't we? Because we got to do A times C. That's 3 times -40, which is -120. Yowza. And 19 in the bottom. So I need two numbers that multiply to -120 and add up to 19. And if they're multiplying to be a negative, then one's got to be a negative, one's positive, right? So I'm going to start thinking of ways to multiply to get 120 that subtract to give me 19. Because I know one's got to be negative. So 120, 12 times 10. Those aren't going to subtract to 19. What else goes into 120? 24. Does 24 go into 120? Goes in 12 goes into 24, so I feel like 24 should go into 120. Does it? 24 times what? Ooh, 24 and 5. That could work, couldn't it? 24 and 5. Which one would we make negative? We could make it an. I think we'd want to make the 5 negatives. 5 negative. Yeah, because we're trying to get a plus 19. Cool. Fill in our box. 3x squared negative 40. We've got a negative 5x and a 24x. I'm trying to think what I could put off to the side here. What goes into both 3 and 5? There's only one number that goes into both 3 and 5. One whole number. 1. Yeah, it's going to have to be a 1. They do both have x's, so I'll make it 1x. That's going to make filling out the top pretty easy, actually. 1x times 3x is 3x squared. 1x times negative 5 is negative 5x. I think this is going to need to be, what? 3 times 8. 3 times 8 is 24. And 5 times 8 is 40. Yeah, that's it. All right, almost there. We got x plus 8. We got 3x minus 5. So we split them up, set them equal to 0, and solve those two separate equations. X plus 8 equals 0. 3x minus 5 equals 0. And again, if you're okay skipping straight to the answer, I'm okay. You don't need to show me minus 8 on both sides. If you can kind of do that in your head and know that you're going to get n equals negative 8. If you want to show the steps, go ahead and show the steps. If it helps you, then show the steps. I know that I can solve this in my head. Can you solve this in your head? Oops. All right, Sex. Thank you. Can you solve this one in your head? What would you do first? You do plus 5 on both sides, right? So you'd end up with a 5 over here. You still have a 3x over there. What are you going to do to get rid of that 3? Divide by 3. So you're going to end up with 5 over 3 for your final answer. If you can jump straight to 5 over 3, that's fine. If you'd like to show all those steps, that's great, Jeff. Again, and I keep going back to n. Thank you. Can't let it go. Thank you for the corrections. I appreciate it. Okay, so you've got 6 more of those to do, and then we kind of switch gears. Y'all remember how to do these ones at the bottom? Remember these guys? You should remember these fondly because these are really easy and fast. All right, so you got a few of those, you got a few more factoring, and then we're just going to practice some proportions and some solving equations. So you got the rest of the period. I'm going to pass back your tests. We took a test